Welcome to the What to Play podcast. We are your hosts, Jacob and Lucas. Lucas, how has your day been going?
I'm good. How about you?
Oh, it's going well. So, to begin with this, and at this point of the year, I always get a little sad because it's like the year's almost over. We have essentially 3 games left of football, and that's it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm doing well. Let's do this. Jarrod Mayo is now the head coach of the New England Patriots. This was definitely the succession plan that Mayo would get the job after Belichick leaves. It was in his contract. But Lucas, you are a resident Patriots fan. What did you think about the decision?
I like the decision. I was kind of shocked, especially because it came out after too. When we hired him, that we didn't interview anyone else. It was just as soon as Belichick was gone, it was Mayo. I would have probably preferred Mike Vrabel just because he's proven as a head coach in the NFL, where Mayo isn't proven as even defensive coordinator. So to get catapulted into a head coaching position, it's going to be interesting. But I do like the move. I do think it's the right move for us going forward.
I do agree with that. I think for the Patriots, you needed a young coach, which you could have worked with Vrabel. That would have worked. But the team's just not talented at the moment. You need someone that's in for the long haul, who kind of just, okay, what do we have that is value? All right, so we got 2 tight ends that are decent. I think Gesicki was on a 1 year, if I remember. And you got nothing really left at that point. Your defense, if anything, I'll say this about Belichick. He still knows how to coach a defense. To take Christian Gonzalez and Matt Jujon out of there and still have a capable defense who kept you in games for the most part. You can't say anything bad about that. I definitely think there's issues, and this isn't in the script, but who do you think New England's first pick would be? Would they go quarterback in the draft?
I think so. I think he said, Mayo said something in an interview that I forget exactly the words he used, but we're gonna pick from a position that we need or something like that, and that can only be 2 positions. That would be receiver or quarterback. I think quarterback is the way to go. I think we need a new face. I don't think Mac Jones is the worst quarterback out there, but I think he's not going to work out in New England. Zappi's not going to work out. If we have a new head coach, we have a new face, and we need a new face at quarterback.
I think the interesting thing is going to be looking at Jarrod Mayo's staff. What's it going to exactly look like? Is he going to have guys with experience, or is he going to go with a younger group? I think that's up to determination. I know they've interviewed a couple guys who are assistants that are moving up in there. I kind of want to see how that happens.
Yeah.
And how the players will respond to that. All right. Moving on to when the Cowboys and Eagles both losing in the wild card round in almost hilarious fashion, I think is the best way to put it. Because it's the only way I don't feel like, why do I hate myself for liking this team?
Yeah.
Because, and you can make both reasons why for each team. The decision was made by both owners that both coaches are going to stay. And I don't quite understand. For Nick Sirianni, let's start with him. He was they were 10-1. You can't say, okay, yes, they were bad 10-1, but they were 10-1. Your record speaks for itself. There's definite issues because you were not going to get 70 sacks again. That was just not going to happen. Your team isn't as talented. Your guys are a little older, step slower. It's harder to perform. However, the way they were terrible, let's be honest, and I'm going to go, they were dog shit in the second half of the year. They were just terrible. When Drew Lock is dicing you up, when Tyrod Taylor, who comes in for a half, is dicing you up, and then for a whole game dices you up, that can't happen. I don't care. Kyler Murray and the Cardinals start beating you, and they beat you in time of possession. I mean, you didn't score an offensive touchdown against Dallas. These are things that are real issues. They fired the defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. Matt Patricia's probably not that far out behind him. We'll see what they do on offense, but there is a definite issue with the Eagles. And yet there's people saying, Nick Sirianni needs to be fired. Unlikely. But what did you hear about when you heard those rumors come out that Nick Sirianni could be canned after just going to a Super Bowl?
It's a what have you done for me lately type of league. It's easy, and especially head coaching, because they were very similar to the team that made it to the Super Bowl. So to get knocked out in the wild card round was pretty shocking, and it's easy to blame coaching. I mean, coaching was clearly the issue when it came to the defensive side of the ball, and even the offensive side of the ball. The defense was terrible, and it's not Sirianni. Sirianni wasn't the one coaching, like the defense or the offense or whatever. But I mean, the decision to move on from Desai midseason to have Matt Patricia as your defensive coordinator. But Matt Patricia was not the only time he was a good defense coordinator was in New England, which was a long time ago. That decision is kind of alarming if you're an Eagles fan. And I think a lot of the rumors had to deal with the fact that Bill Belichick is available. So even teams that have a solid head coach are looking at themselves, and if they're not performing how they'd like to perform, they're like, should we make the upgrade? Because he is an upgrade. So it's not surprising.
I think for the Eagles, and you hit it right on the head, once they moved off of Desai, and I think that was a panic move, they lost to San Francisco, who was the number 1 seed, obviously. Then they lost to Dallas. Both teams are excellent teams. San Francisco is just all better rounded, but Dallas is a killer at home. They're going until the game against Green Bay. They did not lose at home, so it was an overreaction. I say, but for Sean Desai, it wasn't just that they moved off him. They didn't really move off him. They just kind of said, "Okay, you're not calling the plays anymore. You go upstairs, Matt Patricia. You call the plays," which wasn't going to work. Because you're saying, okay, bring in a new guy mid-season. He's running the plays that we ran anyway. Just a different guy saying it, which means that there's a different setup to what we're going to call. But I'll even say this. When he was in New England, he was not the best coordinator there. It was okay, we'll give you yards, but we're not going to let you score touchdowns. That's fine. Then he goes to Detroit and messes that up. And now he broke Mac Jones. I don't know how you can do that, but he did it. And then now he's in Philadelphia as a special assistant. And I understand why, okay, Sirianni It was bad. Coaching was bad. But firing him made no sense. The same goes for Mike McCarthy. Now, I could go on all day about what Dallas did wrong. But instead, I'm going to go and say what Dallas needs to fix. And what Philadelphia needs to fix will come up after this. There's times I see Dallas when they play, they don't look prepared to play. There's a couple of those games. The game against Arizona, they didn't look prepared. The game against Green Bay, they didn't look prepared. There's games like that. That and their inability to win on the road. They can't win on the road. You know who they beat on the road? They beat the Giants. They beat the Panthers. They beat the Commanders. And they beat the Chargers. That's who they beat. They can't beat anyone on the road. So that you got that. Then you got all this other nonsense going on. So you got all these coaches that no one played well. No one coached well. But I understand why Jerry said, you know what? You won 12-5 the last 3 times. You can't deny that. But there's a lot more. You're not as good as you think you are, kind of thing. So I understand why Mike McCarthy was kept. I didn't care much about it. The media cared for whatever reason because it's a Cowboy issue. But it was a fine choice. I just think you got to fix things. And the same thing goes for the Eagles. You got to fix things, but you shouldn't move off your head coach because of that.
So I'll ask you, what changes do you think need to be made? Because no one's disputing, like, if Mike McCarthy was fired, I would not be shocked if a team hired him as their head coach. I mean,
right.
Having 3 12-win seasons back to back. I mean, you take it for granted, but even just as a Patriots fan, for like the past 5 years, we've been terrible. Even though we made the playoffs with, I think it was like a 10-win season a couple years ago, and then we got blown out by Buffalo. We have not been good. So a lot of teams, especially get off the Patriots, like just talking about bad teams, like Chicago, for an example. Chicago fans would probably kill for 3 12-win seasons in a row.
Oh, absolutely.
So the issue and the biggest issue that people have with Mike and the Cowboys is just they play lights out football during the year. Come playoffs, they lay an egg every time. That's the issue. So what do you think is the problem?
Well, and it starts with the coach. You can obviously say that. The Green Bay game, they don't look prepared. The offense, and I think this is what's happened with Dallas. You got rid of Kellen Moore, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? The offense looked good. It looked really good. The problem is, it's kind of like when the Rams had Cooper Kupp. So Cooper Kupp centric. We got to run the ball with Cooper Kupp. We got to throw the ball with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has to be the blocker. Cooper Kupp has to be everything. That's the way with CeeDee Lamb, which is not a bad thing. It's just, it's not sustainable. And the fact Dallas could not run the ball for shit. They were terrible. You can't run it. And like, you got 2 future Hall of Famers on the offensive line. You can't run the ball. You can't move it. Like, and everyone's like saying, Derrick Henry, bring in Derrick Henry. For what? You gotta run the football. I don't care who you have back there. You could have Walter Payton back there. If you can't move the football, how is that supposed to help you? That's the thing. You gotta run the ball better.
So how do you go about doing that? Do you want Do you want Mike McCarthy to get off play calling? Do you want to bring in another OC? Do you want Dan Quinn to leave? What's the solution?
Well, first of all, I think you need to bring in another offensive line coach. You can't. I want Mike to stay as OC. I really do. Because once they figured out, okay, we get CD the ball more, it worked. The offense worked. Dak looked great. Dak was an MVP. The defense, there's got to be fixes. I don't know if Dan Quinn is going to interview with the Commanders this week. He's interviewing with the Seahawks this week. I don't know if he stays. I don't know. I think if you're Dallas, you have to have a conversation because you're too good and you're wasting a lot of good players' careers if you don't make a switch. Now, what is that? You need linebackers, number one. You had no linebackers. You were so thin. So does that start with coaching? I guess. But it also starts with, we need to go get people. We need to go get somebody. Because if that's Leighton Vander Esch's last game is the game against San Francisco where you get blown out and he doesn't play another game of football, you have to figure out this linebacker. So I wouldn't be against Dan Quinn coming back. I'd be against us coming back and we change nothing. That's what I'd be against. Because something has to change. This team is not mentally tough or physically tough. The elements hit and they decide we're going to run the ball even though we can't. That we're going to play defense even though we were terrible on defense in the late stages. That's really what happens. So, to answer your question, I wouldn't change Mike McCarthy. If Dan Quinn comes back, I wouldn't be upset about it. But we do need to be more aggressive, at least in free agency, to bring some guys in.
Yeah.
Because this is getting ridiculous. Well, and Lucas, you brought this up. Bill Belichick is an upgrade, and the Falcons feel the same, as the Falcons have met with Bill Belichick twice. They've also met with Jim Harbaugh. And we'll meet with him again a second time this week. But Bill Belichick, I was interested by this decision. I definitely was. Because I was like, the Chargers job looks interesting to me for him. You got a quarterback. You got weapons. But what did you first think when Bill Belichick said, okay, I'm going to go and talk to Atlanta?
I think it might be the, dare I say, best fit for him. I feel like there's still, I think the Chargers, so everyone was going on about like Belichick wants to mold his team. He wants to be the one to make the decisions, bring the people in. The Chargers don't, I mean, like, they need to either re-sign or draft new receivers because a lot of the receivers are on expiring contracts. Outside of that, if you could coach that defense to perfection, that team is ready to, win. I think Atlanta I think they have a good defense, Atlanta. I think he could make that defense from good to great. You have playmakers like Jesse Bates on that team who was, through all of, Atlanta's troubles. Like, I mean, he had a good season. They have young, talented players. You have a Kyle Pitts. Obviously, you saw what Belichick could do with tight ends in his career. They need a quarterback. Ritter, it's not going to do it. You have people like Drake London. You have guys. I do think Atlanta, if they brought in Belichick, would be very good. And I think another aspect to look at it is look who is in the Chargers division and look who's in Atlanta's division. I think Belichick would have a lot. And look who's in the AFC if you want to look broader, and look who's in the NFC. I think Belichick would have a lot easier time winning games in Atlanta than Los Angeles just for the fact of who his competition would be. And I think Atlanta has multiple players and has already players in positions where you get a coach, you have an off season, free agency and the draft. They could be good next year if they brought in Belichick. So I think it would be a good fit for him.
I agree. I think it's a good fit. The quarterback position is really where I'm at. Is like, okay, is it Desmond Ridder? Okay, it's not. Who do you bring in at this point? Okay, if you don't have a high draft choice, really, if I remember correctly.
No.
So,
I saw
maybe
something. I don't know if I don't know if it really makes sense because, and I'm actually not even sure if this is true or it's just something I saw online, but I saw a rumor that said Kirk Cousins said that if he had the opportunity to play with Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, then he would go for it. He said, like, why would I not want to play for the greatest coach ever? Kirk Cousins is still under contract for next season. It's something to look after, though. I mean, Kirk Cousins seems like a Bill Belichick type of quarterback. And, you plug a veteran player like Kirk into that system, and obviously he'd be moldable and coachable. That would be an interesting move because, like you said, they don't have a high draft pick. So is Belichick really trying to mold a young quarterback, draft a quarterback, mold a young quarterback? That takes years. So getting someone pro ready like Kirk is something to look into.
Well, and I was thinking, because I thought Kirk had no years after this. I thought he was just going to get his new contract at the end. I believe he's going into free agency this year, so maybe that is the chance. But I do think, like, you can't, if you are going to make a trade for somebody, you need somebody that is somewhat proven, that, and that's not likely for them. I mean, who are you going to get from a backup's perspective to say, okay, this guy? The only guy I can think of in my head is Trey Lance. It's the only thing I could think of. And even that is a molding project. So do you want to do that? The answer is no. You much rather have a team like Dallas do that and then say, okay, we're done. Let's move on. Let's trade him and see what we get. That I could see that. So my best bet is, okay, we draft somebody. Maybe a JJ McCarthy. Maybe a Michael Penn or something. You got to do something. Because the free agency is not the best year for quarterbacks this year. It's just not. Unless maybe you go Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe you bring that all back around. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see.
Next up, Jason Kelce, who I said on the NFL World YouTube channel that he was retiring because everyone said it. Schefter said it. And again, this is my mistake. This was my mistake. Trusting ESPN with news is a mistake. It's expecting a person who is a consummate liar to tell the truth. It's what it is. Jason Kelce has yet to put in the paperwork to say he's retired. So he is thinking about one more year. And I do think it does depend who's going to want a 36, 37-year-old center. Would Philadelphia be okay with that? Because he was not as good. Let's be honest, he was just not as good. He was okay, but made a lot of mistakes. They had some issues. You can make note that was all coaching, but still, I wasn't shocked that he would think about it because a lot of people, and I don't know if did you watch the documentary, Kelce?
No.
Okay, it's on Prime Video. I would encourage you to watch it. It's really good. But he that near the end of that season after the Super Bowl loss, his wife is like, he's times where he'll sit on the couch and he's there, but he's not there. He's somewhere else. He's trying to figure this out. And that's basically what this is, I think. He's at this point of, okay, Travis is in the next round, so I have to be interested in that. But I'm also trying to figure out if I want to play again. So I think he'll give it one more year, but I think, will it be in Philadelphia? The answer is I don't know. I can't imagine it being anywhere else.
Kansas City. Yeah, that writes itself. I don't know.
But they have Creed Humphrey, so that's why I'm like, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's completely up to him. It's not up to ESPN, so whatever Jason wants to hang it up.
Well, and we were gonna bring this up, and I forgot about with Jarrod Mayo, but ESPN, and this I have a gripes with ESPN because I don't understand why they do this nonsense. They're still talking about the Cowboys, even though the Cowboys have been out for a week. Still talking about it. Why? Makes no sense. They're out. Let's talk about the Ravens and what they did against Houston. Let's talk about what happened with TJ Bass missing a kick to potentially bring that game to overtime last night. Why are we talking about Dallas still? Makes no sense. Because it's Dallas. That's the only reason. So, ESPN, and I bring this all back around, ESPN made a big deal when Jarrod Mayo was hired. Not that he was a good coach and it was in the contract that he was going to get hired, but because he was black. This would be the first black coach in New England Patriots history. And this was his Jackie Robinson moment. Until, wait. This isn't Jackie Robinson at all. There's black players, there's been black coaches in the league. And yet they make it sound like it's... it shouldn't bother me this much until you realize when a black coach gets fired how much it bothers them. That's what annoys me, is them saying, like when Marvin Lewis got fired, we all knew Marvin Lewis had to be fired. Like, you could not keep trying to put this square peg into a round hole. It just didn't work. It was there too long. And they were saying, when he got fired, how could he be fired? He was a good coach. It's like, no, he wasn't. He was a bad coach. He was there forever. So I guess for seniority reasons, he would be there. But he was a bad coach. That, to me, just bothers me. It's that ESPN, we need to have all coaches in the NFL be black, and if they're not, we hate them for whatever reason. Makes no sense.
Yeah. I just want to have a good coach. I don't care, what the color of their skin is or anything like that. So that's all I care about, is just production.
Same thing with me. Same exact thing with me. It would be like, Lucas, if you ran a business, you have two guys. One guy is white, the other one's black. But the guy who is black has all the experience. He does everything right. He's a great guy. He does his job perfectly. No one has any bad thing to say about him. And you have another guy who is white but just doesn't do the same thing. I'm not hiring the guy because he's black. I'm hiring the guy because he's a good coach or he's a good fit for what we're trying to do. And I'm hoping for production. That's what I want. There's a reason for that. They brought Jarrod Mayo in for production. They see what he brought. They've seen what coaches who've played before can bring and what he brings. And plus, he was the planned successor. Why not? Like, it's a production business. Let's see what you got. It doesn't matter what color he is. It matters if you can get the job done. If you can, great, you'll be there for a long time. If you can't, see you later. It's the way it works. It's not that hard. Next up, the Saints fired offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael after 15 seasons with the team. This is the first time they are changing the offense for the Saints since 2009. What happened in 2009? The Saints won the Super Bowl. This had to happen. It had to. They just never looked. No one looked on the same page. There's a rumor going out and around that John Gruden could be the offensive coordinator of the Saints. We'll see. He's in a court battle with the NFL, so let's see what happens there. But a reunion for Gruden and Derek Carr, I'd be okay with that.
That would be interesting.
Next up, the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce as the full-time head coach. And I expected this to happen. You could not go through another situation of we have an interim coach the players like, and instead we're going to bring in somebody else. Rich Bisaccia brings him to playoffs. Say, you know what? Let's bring in Josh McDaniels, which is like drinking snake oil. They didn't like him in Denver. He said, I'm going to go be the coach of the Colts. Decided, let's turn the plane around. And then he goes and gets the Raider job. They bring in Ziegler from the Patriots to be the GM. Fails miserably. And Antonio Pierce brought it together. Yeah, I wasn't shocked by this.
Me neither. I like this move a lot. Like you could have brought in, and I mentioned it a few weeks back. Like I wouldn't have been surprised if they brought in Harbaugh for this job. He was definitely in the running for it. But I like this move a lot. I think it's kind of like what Dan Campbell did with the Lions. It's about the culture that you build. You got to build a winning culture before you actually win. Like Dan Campbell wasn't like a proven head coach or something like that before he went to the Lions, but he brought a culture with him. And with that, they were able to turn things around late last season. And then this season, obviously, the success they've had, they have a chance to make it to the Super Bowl next week. So Antonio Pierce is a good hire. He obviously, all the players were behind him, rallying behind him. I can see him building a strong culture, which the Raiders have needed forever. And I mean, if he can establish a good winning culture, then they can probably win football games. So I like the hire a lot.
I too I love this hire for a couple of reasons. One, you're paying Gruden and McDaniels a lot of money to not be a coach. So you're already cash strung as it is. So bringing in an unproven guy, he's not going to expect a lot of money, which is good. The locker room likes him. When you get endorsed by Max Crosby and Devontae Adams, pretty good deal. But I think the big thing that's very important is the mistake between what happened with Bisaccia. He held that crew together with all the nonsense that was going on. That was like angel wings to them in the city of Las Vegas. You have the John Gruden situation. You have the Henry Ruggs situation, the Arnett situation. You have things going on that we don't know about. All of a sudden, you've managed to get into the playoffs. You were winning close games. You make it into the playoffs. You nearly beat a team that was going to go into the Super Bowl a couple weeks later. And yet you said, we're going in another direction. Okay, that makes no sense, but all right. I'm interested to see what Antonio Pierce does. I'm excited for this. It was said that Marvin Lewis is also supposed to be on the staff. I don't know in which capacity. But this could be Marvin Lewis's ticket back to the NFL. One thing I want to make clear is I don't know exactly what his staff's going to look like. What's it going to be? Is it going to be a mixture of what the McDaniel staff was? Is it going to be a whole new staff? What's it going to look like? That's a question that has to be answered in the coming weeks. But I love this hire. I think Mark Davis got this one right.
Yep.
And before we hit into the recap, I want Zach Ertz signs with the Detroit Lions practice squad, becoming he'll sign, move his way up, probably will play, he'll be at least an activation for this game against the Niners. So let's move into the recap. But before we do that, what was your thoughts when Zach Ertz signed this morning?
It was interesting for sure. I don't know how much of an impact he's really going to make, if he's going to play a lot in this NFC Championship game. But yeah, it was definitely interesting.
That's the best way I could come up with it too. It's interesting. I didn't think it was going to happen, but it was interesting because it's like after he was released, he became kind of like an afterthought in many ways. We just didn't know or didn't care. And I know he said he wanted to sign with a contender. I just didn't know it was going to happen now, I guess, is the best way I can put it. So, moving on into the recap portion. The Texans go up against the Ravens. The Ravens beat them 34-10. I was actually surprised that at halftime this game was 10-10. You had a lot go the way of the Texans. If I remember, they missed a field goal early in this game. They come back. They get a punt return for a touchdown. And then the Ravens took over. I should say Lamar Jackson took over. I thought Zay Flowers played really well. That Ravens defense is legit. And they're definitely a contender for the Super Bowl because I think they'll beat the brakes off Kansas City.
Yeah, no. This comes down to like the Texans have nothing to be disappointed about. The Ravens are a juggernaut. They're the best team in the AFC. They proved it by getting the 1 seed. So it's nothing to hang their hat on, like you said. Like to even just it be tied at halftime was impressive in itself. And Lamar Jackson is most likely the MVP. They got the best defense in the league. The Ravens do, and it's a big moment, and especially in Baltimore in that stadium, it was loud. It's not surprising what took place, but the Texans have nothing to hang their hat on. The Ravens are just really, really good. So Texans can go through the off season and get some more experience, and they'll be back ready next year. So.
I want to make this abundantly clear. I said this on the show on the NFL World YouTube channel. They will burn this award to the ground and then burn the place with it if DeMeco Ryans not the coach of the year.
Yeah.
He has to be the coach of the year. They won 3 games last year. They go in, they win 10 games. They brought in CJ Stroud, and all of a sudden, they were playing unbelievable. Nico Collins had like a great year. Noah Brown had a great year. Dalton Schultz had a great year. And on top of like playing with your 5th or 6th starting offensive line because you were so injured, you bring in Will Anderson. He was doing everything he could. He was banged up. You did everything you could. You should not be disappointed by this. You went toe-to-toe with a team that's probably going to be in the Super Bowl, with probably the MVP. You should not be upset about this. But I love what CJ Stroud said in his press conference. Where I'm from, he's talking about when he was in college. Where I'm from, this counts as a failure. So during the off season, I will go and work harder. I love that. How many times do you hear a rookie quarterback talk like that and say, you know what, we want a playoff game, but we lost this game. Granted, there's no talent around him, but they won a playoff game. They lose this one. You can't be upset, but you gotta be happy and excited for what the years to come out for the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the Packers and 49ers game. The 49ers won a very close game, 24-21. And I watched this game, Lucas. I tried. First of all, let's start with the Packers. Great season. The way you guys played. Youngest team in the league, you win a playoff game. That's impressive. You controlled the ground game even against the Niners. You made the Niners defense look not good. That's what you did. Great job by Matt LaFleur. Jordan Love looked good through this whole season. He'll get paid. Just 2 bad interceptions. One kind of gets away from him, gets tipped, gets intercepted by Greenlaw. Late in the game, he throws a ball across your body back to the middle of the field. Cardinal sin in playing a quarterback, but he's a guy hasn't had a whole lot of experience. You kind of expect him to make those mistakes, but a great season nonetheless. What you did was very impressive.
Yeah, the Packers. Yeah, I mean, what a season for them. They got their quarterback. They got their guy. Jordan Love was impressive in this game. The Packers. I mean, honest to God, the Packers. I thought they were going to win this game. Like I saw, I think it was Gronk that said it in the post game that like the Packers were the better team for 58 minutes. Like they just couldn't close. But I mean, that just comes with experience, and like you said, the youngest team in the NFL. It takes time. Matt LaFleur did a great job this year. Yeah, so the Packers, I mean, they're going to come back next year. I'm sure they will have a better regular season than what they had this season. You know, get a better seeding. I'm sure they'll be competitive with the Lions for that division for years to come. And yeah, another team like the Texans, where I mean, it's looking like they're on the up and up after this. I will say, leading into the 49ers Lions game this upcoming weekend, Niners, as you could see from this game, they need Deebo Samuel. They need him out there. They need him making plays. If he does not play, and I think, and it's so early in the week to even know, but if he does not play like that, that would probably sway a lot of people's decisions to pick Detroit in the Super Bowl rather than the 49ers.
Agreed. So what the report came out to said it's going to be like 50-50 to see if he goes, which probably means to try and play. He didn't go through any real injury, so severe injury, so he should be okay. But you're right. Like the games they lost this year, and I'm thinking of the 3 games they lost in a row. The game against the Browns, he gets hurt. The movement of that offense was just not as good. Then they play Minnesota, which they're better than Minnesota, but they just struggled. They were bad. And then the game against Cincinnati, they were just bad. So they definitely do need Deebo Samuel. I think they need Deebo Samuel more than they need Christian McCaffrey. I just think that's the way it is. But I think really what affected the Niners, and this put a scare in the Niners, I think. The Packers did. Because Detroit's a very similar style team. They want to impose their will. They'll run the ball. I want to see what they have to do to stop Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I want to see that. I thought this was the best game of the weekend. This game and then the Buccaneers Lions game, to me, were the best games. For the 49ers, Brock Purdy did not play good in this game. I know it rained. I understand it rained. But it felt like everything was off for him. He had the glove on early in the game. It was slipping out of his hands. We've been there. That when it rains and you get a wet glove, it's hard. He took the glove off. He's still missing high to the outside. It's not good. And a lot of people say, well, Brock wasn't his best, and I'll say that too. Good on the game-winning drive, but this is just creates more of a narrative for him that he's not a good enough quarterback if he's going to keep doing it. If this keeps happening, I should say.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of pressure on him, especially next week in the game. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it.
Exactly. Now, the Buccaneers-Lions game. What an exciting game this was. 31-23 was the final. The Lions pull off the win. I don't know if you saw on Twitter or on anything. Peyton Manning was at this game. The drummer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers was at this game. Eminem was obviously at this game. He's a big Lions fan. But this game was so exciting, I think. A run game. Both offenses are good. Baker Mayfield played well. 2 interceptions. I'll say that. Not his best performance. But like Mike Evans just showed how good of a wide receiver he still is. 10 years, 10 1,000-yard seasons. He dominated this game. A lot of people are going to say, why go for the 2-point conversion there? You're down 14. You want to at least kick an extra point to win the game. I don't blame it. I really don't. I don't think Todd Bowles was the reason you lost this game. I think once Jamel Dean got hurt, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I don't think it was Bowles. I don't think it was Baker. That Tampa defense probably just needed to play better. They needed to make more plays. There was a play early in the game where I want to say it was Jamel Dean. Maybe it was someone else where they just dropped. Goff gave him a gift. He threw what should have been an interception straight into the hands of a Buccaneers corner, and he just dropped it right in the end zone. I think the Lions were at the 1, and I want to say the Lions scored on that drive. Not positive.
They got a 3 on that drive.
They got a field goal. Either way, not even just going by the scoreboard. That's momentum.
Yeah.
So either way, the Buccaneers impressed. I don't know. I wouldn't say for the Buccaneers that they're necessarily on the up and up like the Texans and the Packers. The Buccaneers have a really hard schedule for next season. They face a lot of, current playoff teams. I think Baker's on a 1 year. Does Baker want to come back? I mean, he was fighting for his life out there with that O-line. I'm sure he's going to get opportunities around the league. Baker played a really good he played really well in the playoffs. The first interception wasn't his fault. The second interception was, but he still played a really good game. Lions are just a great team. So, will this Buccaneers team be back next season? I don't know. I don't think so. Will Baker Mayfield be the quarterback for them next year? Totally up to him. I think the ball's in his court, so it'll be interesting.
I think if you're the Buccaneers, you can't let Baker Mayfield out the door. You just can't. He was impressive, but you have a lot of guys who are free agents. A lot of big key guys are free agents this year. Devin White, who got kind of replaced by the young rookie Britt, he'll probably leave, I would anticipate. Levante David is up. Antoine Winfield's up. Mike Evans is up. So there's guys that are up after this year, but you're right, it was Jamel Dean who didn't intercept that pass, but again, I think if you're this team, I don't know if they'll be back next year. I don't know if Todd Bowles will be the coach after that. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. For what they were capable of doing, no one anticipated them to be in the playoffs. Nobody. We were like, oh, this is not going to happen. This is Atlanta or New Orleans. And Tampa comes out of nowhere and starts playing. And they start beating teams. You're like, how did they do that? So I think this was a great job. I think Baker's the guy. And like it's always hard to be the guy after the guy. It's always hard. It's almost an impossible task. For him to do that and play that way, I was impressed. All right, moving on to the final game. Chiefs versus Bills. The Chiefs win a narrow game 27-24 after a TJ Bass in the probably the 3 or 4 worst words in Buffalo. Wide to the right. This game, you can say whatever you want about Josh Allen. I thought he was okay I thought he was good until the fourth quarter. And then there was just weird decisions. Like he has Stephon Diggs on that little drag route to make that field goal closer or get a first down. Decides I'm not taking it. I'm going to go for the end zone shot. I thought they didn't run the ball. I was confused about that. Why not run it at that point? The Bills are injured beyond belief on defense, so I'm not going to really blame defense because they have no linebackers. They got none. And there's teams that have gone through that this year where there's just no linebackers. You're trying to find guys, but I was very disappointed because I don't think the Chiefs played very well either.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs, out of all the years, especially that Mahomes has been starting throughout the whole year, this year was the weakest year for Kansas City. So for them to get to the AFC Championship, to me, is kind of like looking at the other teams in the AFC, like, come on, like, but are they really like in contention to represent the AFC again? I just feel like when they're great, when they're lights out, sure. I mean, like you can hate all you want, but they're a great team. But I feel like really this year was like again like Buffalo, come on, or and stuff happened like Joe Burrow getting hurt and things like that to shake things up. Or maybe they had a little bit easier of a road than they would have. But I don't know what the issue is in Buffalo. I think Sean McDermott is fine. I think that is what Buffalo fans might be looking at come the end of the season. Is Sean McDermott to blame? I don't think so. I think he's a good coach. Josh Allen's a good player. Like you said, they're decimated with injuries. It's just they just can't see. They're Buffalo is probably the most similar team to the Cowboys in the league, and they don't really get the hate that the Cowboys do. I feel like they're in a very, very similar boat. They have a star receiver, star quarterback, good head coach, can't make it in the playoffs every year. Great regular season. Buffalo's probably going to win the division next year again. Buffalo or Miami. And Miami didn't show anything that they could take it from Buffalo, so I would assume Buffalo next year. But are they going to do anything in the playoffs? They haven't led you to believe that they will. So I don't really know what the solution is for Buffalo, but it's just a very disappointing season all around.
Well, and you're right about that because I don't know. Did you watch Get Up this morning? Because
No.
this is okay. Because I don't even watch it, but I see the clips all over my Twitter feed, and it's all like the quarterback can play unbelievable football, and a team loses. We've seen that 100 times. Quarterback plays amazing, and the team loses. We've seen that, and yet they'll go and be like, "Well, the quarterback was bad." But I swear, when it's like Mahomes, Allen, even to Stafford, where they go and say, "Oh," and it's mostly Dan Orlovsky. Which, by the way, how did he get a job? I'm still confused about that. Hire guys like Peyton Manning. Hire these guys. This would be interesting if you hired those guys instead of hire a guy who held a clipboard for most of his career. But I digress. It's Josh Allen's great. He played great. The Bills just didn't do it. It's like, no. It's third down. First of all, it's a windy day. You're putting your kicker in a terrible position. The wind's blowing to the right. So he's in a terrible position to kick from the right side. You miss Stephon Diggs. He's wide open. Maybe he gets the first down. Maybe he makes an easier third down. But you just missed him entirely. And I could see that. I'm like, oh, he missed Diggs, didn't he? Yep. And yes, there was injuries, and yes, there was all this stuff, and every team gets hurt. But you can't be this bad, I think, at some of these key moments. And you're right, they are a lot like Dallas. They have a good coach, they have a great quarterback, they just don't make enough plays. And I think the Bills, this was their shot. You could go, I'm not saying you would have beaten Baltimore, but you had your chance to beat Kansas City in the playoffs, something you haven't been able to do. You've beaten them in the regular season. You've never beaten them in the playoffs. But again, you put your kicker in a terrible situation to have to go tie the game in the wind, and all of a sudden, he misses it, and then your defense needs to get a stop, and they're unable to do so. That's Buffalo Bills football.
And that I really don't know what the solution is for them. They're just gonna go home, rest up, heal up, and I don't know, just kind of hope the AFC shakes out the way you want it to next year. Maybe you have an easier path to the Super Bowl, but it's not there's no easy decision to fix that team. And Josh Allen, and I mean the farther that they get with the players that they have, I saw that Josh Allen's cap hit next year is massive. So it's not getting easier.
No, and the thing is that makes it worse for the Bills, and you do have to give credit to the Chiefs here in some respect. They did a good enough job. But there's definite concern, I think, with this team in Kansas City. This could have been, and next week could be Chris Jones' last game in Kansas City. Could also be Andy Reid's last game as coach, as there's rumors of him retiring. They don't have anyone to really throw to besides Kelsey. So the defense is definitely the star of the show, but at some point, you can't just keep squeaking these games out.
Yeah, I think Kansas City played a good game. Yeah, you're right. To give them credit, Kansas City was impressive, and they do always show up when they need to, when it matters most. In the play, like I was saying earlier, they didn't have a good regular season. Let's be honest. I mean, they were good, but for Kansas City standards, they were not good. But here they are in the AFC Championship, and they have a chance to go back to the Super Bowl, possibly repeat. So, props to Kansas City. I do think it'll be a tough matchup for them next week. I think Baltimore is legit. But, yeah, you got to give credit where credit's due. So, credit to Mahomes, credit to Kelsey and Reed and all of my Kansas City.
So before we get out of here, let's preview the AFC and NFC Championship games. I have who is favored in each game here. So it's Kansas City at Baltimore. The Ravens are only favored by 2, which I think is very disrespectful. But who do you got winning, Lucas?
Is this the game that's on at 3:00 or?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think that affects anything. I was just wondering. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I mean, these two offenses, these two quarterbacks, I think are going to play lights out ball. There's not a situation for both of them where. I think the last time the Ravens made it to the AFC Championship, if I remember hearing on the broadcast, was when they won the Super Bowl in 2012. But either way, Lamar's played in big games. None of these the moment's not going to be big for any of these quarterbacks, or too big for any of these quarterbacks. I think this is going to be a battle of whose defense plays better. I don't think it's gonna. I think that's what it's going to come down to, and I think the Chiefs in the playoffs, who they faced, they're finally facing a team I think that has a better defense in Baltimore, and I think that's what's ultimately going to be the factor. I think the Ravens are going to win this game. I think they're going to win this game 34-31 Baltimore.
I too have the Ravens winning. I think this is going to be such an interesting game because I really think this is the game that if Todd Monken wins this game with the Ravens, he's a head coach in the NFL somewhere. Todd Monken's the offense coordinator of the Ravens. What he has done, they brought in Zay Flowers, OBJ, Isaiah Likely has turned to be a star. They might get Mark Andrews back next week. So these are things that are really huge. And they've had injuries. J.K. Dobbins, Mitchell, they're out. Okay, we're rolling with Gus the Bus and Dalvin Cook. Let's go. Doesn't matter. You got Lamar Jackson on your team. Let's go. And then their defense is legit. I'm concerned this is the game. Like, Buffalo could not cover Travis Kelce. This team probably could. How good they are at the safety room. Kyle Hamilton is unbelievable. He's so long. His arms are so long. It's like watching Kevin Durant play football. It's scary. It's like he somehow finds he's like elastic. He's like an elastic. He just keeps getting bigger in terms of how he's going to stretch his arm out and defend the play. I like what they did with Geno Stone, but the linebackers I think are what's going to be a key in this game for both teams. Nick Bolton, Willie Gay against Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen. That's this is what is got to be most important. But I have the Ravens winning just because I don't think the Chiefs can keep up. I got 28-21 Ravens. Just not enough energy from the Chiefs side. And then the final game, which I'm happy this is a late game. I'm so happy. Detroit at San Francisco. San Francisco is favored by 7. It's Dan Campbell versus Kyle Shanahan. This game's going to be fun to watch. Who do you got winning, Lucas?
I think I said before, or when the playoffs started, when we knew who the teams were, that I believe the 49ers would win the Super Bowl. And I would be remiss if I didn't pick them in this game. So I'm going to pick the 49ers. They need Deebo Samuel. I think that is top priority for them, is to get him playing in this game and get him healthy. It's not going to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. This one's going to come. I mean, the Lions are legit. The Lions are the real deal. I think this comes down to Dan Campbell's a great coach. I think Kyle Shanahan's a better coach. I think this is going to come down to schemes. I think this is going to come down to X's and O's. I think the 49ers are going to win this game. I think they are the better team. I'm going to go 49ers 28, Lions 24.
Well, I mean, we're in this game, and when I'm looking at these two coaching staffs, I'm like, there could be 3 guys on these coaching staffs that are not here next year. I mean, Ben Johnson, the coordinator, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, and then you got Steve Wilks, what he's done with that group. So this is an interesting game. You're right. Deebo Samuel has to play in this game if San Francisco wants to win. I want to see what this offense of the Lions looks like. This offensive line, I should say. Offensive line versus this defensive line of San Francisco. This is like if you take you take the best defensive line of any team you love and the best offensive line in the league and just have them go against each other. This is this. This is the best way I can put it. This is gonna be fun to watch. I want to see what Brock Purdy looks like in this game. Same thing with Jared Goff, but this is Brock Purdy's biggest test, I think. Not in terms of the secondary of the Lions, just the pressure they can bring is interesting. So I'm gonna go with the Lions to win this game. I believe in Dan Campbell. The Lions have been waiting for this for a long time. I would not be shocked if this game goes into overtime. This will be fun to watch. I have this game 34-31 Detroit. And that is the end of the What to Play podcast. We thank, as this podcast is powered by StreamYard, we thank StreamYard for allowing the What to Play podcast to be shown. Until the end of the NFC Championship game, it's for the What to Play podcast. I'm Jacob, this is Lucas, and we're out. Peace.